Righto, g'day guys, I hope you're all doing well. Today I just want to talk about the last Sam Harris and Peterson debate. For those of you who don't know, they've had a couple of debates on Sam Harris's podcast, and then they've organized 4 debates. First 2 were moderated by Brett Weinstein, and Douglas Murray moderated the last 2. So this last one was in London. They were each what were they? A couple of hours long, each of them. So yeah, I watched the first one, and it just seemed like nothing was happening. Like they were just not going to. They weren't making any progress in closing the gap between them. So I started watching Paul VanderKlay's videos on them, and he would watch it a couple of times and give you a summary of what he thought was going on and what was interesting. So he eventually got to the last one, and he basically started watching around an hour 16 and ended at around an hour 48. So it's about half an hour, and this is an interesting debate, or part of the debate. I haven't even watched the first hour. I just watched Paul's video, and I enjoyed his analysis. And then I've just watched the debate from 1:16 to the end a number of times, and I reckon there's 3 axiomatic differences between the 2, and they talk so close to these 3 differences the whole time that you get to see what's really going on in their disagreements. So yeah, Paul made a couple of points I enjoyed. He said Peterson has spent 8 hours making a point, then Sam Harris gives it away without even realizing it. So he sort of finishes up and says Sam Harris's secularism is just hollowed out or demystified Christianity. And one of the things Douglas Murray said was we may be in the midst of the discovery that the only thing worse than religion is its absence, about 141. I thought that was a very good comment, and I think I might get it in the video. So I've got a couple of clips. But I don't want to go overboard on it. I'd rather just, make my points and then let you guys watch it and see what you think. I think quickly we'll just look here. And this is where Sam Harris gives away the point, as Paul VanderKlay says. He gives Peterson his own point, and he doesn't even notice that he's agreeing with Peterson, but just disagreeing on what the best tools are. So let's give this a watch.
Vivid. But
so are you saying that
this is
your claim that that's a
it is a fact. These are facts about the human mind, and it is also factual to say that it is possible to navigate in this space. It is possible to design,
Peterson says,
institutions and social systems and ethical commitments that help us navigate in this space. And it's not that we all have to get up every morning naked and try to rebuild civilization and all of human wisdom for ourselves each day. We inherit the most useful tools. You don't have to figure this all out for yourself. And my appeal to you is that we should want to use all the best tools available without hamstringing ourselves by this notion that certain tools are...
Right, so he's just made the point Peterson has just constantly backed up for the whole time they've been debating since that first podcast. We should use the best tools. Now Peterson is saying, here's why Christianity is a great tool. Let me explain it. And Harris just wants none of it. You'll see he doesn't even realize it.
Must be the best for all time, or certain books must be read on every page with equal diligence because this book came from the creator of the universe. When we're reading Marcus Aurelius, if he gets something catastrophically wrong on page 17, we say, well, what the hell? He lived 2,000 years ago. There's no way he knew everything, right? And we turn the page.
Okay,
right?
so
we can't do that with the Bible and the Quran.
Here's a mythological representation of that.
Right, so I'll come back to this video. Where am I going? I'll go back to the slides now. Right, so I'll get back to that video at the end of this. at that section of the debate at the end of this video, just to highlight what Peterson's saying. But there's 3 axiomatic differences, and I'll show you a little bit of these. And then if you watch that half hour, you'll just see it's all about these 3 differences, and very often at the same time, which you kind of got to watch it, and then you go, oh, yep, they're talking about all 3 of these things at the same time. But these are the 3 differences, and I suppose they don't appear big, but they make a world of difference. So Jordan Peterson believes that the subjective world is as substantial as the objective world, whereas Sam Harris, he just says, oh, the subjective world is an extension of the objective world. He doesn't say that directly, but he talks about his ethic of love and guided by rationality. So then Jordan Peterson says, well, is love a fact? And Sam Harris says, yeah, it is a fact that you can experience it. And he doesn't quite get the point that Jordan Peterson is making, which is, the same object can make one person experience love and another person hate, and it's the same object. But we'll get into that. The next difference is that Jordan Peterson says the void is permanent, and Sam Harris says we can negate the void. There's quite a lot of difference in the void. So I've made a couple of little sketchy type of things, so we can discuss that, and we'll do that when you get to it. And then the last thing is, Peterson believes that wisdom manifests more easily than folly. So the wiser something is, the better it manifests, and the more foolish something is, the harder it has getting a foothold. Whereas Sam Harris seems to think that wisdom competes with folly on an equal footing. So when he says, well, why does there's a bit where they're saying, okay, so you criticize Christianity, and all the secular types come out and they support you on the TV shows and the talk shows that you go on. But as soon as you start criticizing Islam, all those secular guys run away, and it's the Christians that come to your aid. And he just says, oh, well, they just got the wrong reasons. They just by chance identified the right problem, and that's only because they've got the same problem but just not as bad. So he thinks foolishness, it's a valid excuse if somebody goes, well, why is this so popular, or why has it been around for so long? He thinks he can just say, oh, it's foolishness. Right, so let's look at this first one, subjectivity. And I reckon we'll just watch the video first and then have a chat about that. Okay, here we go.
In the metaphysic that you outlined, rationality in the service of love, like this is an interesting, I'm not sure you get away with that, because is it rationality or is it love? Because I don't understand the place in your conceptual system for love, given your emphasis on rationality as the ethic of as the mechanism of ethics. So I would say, to the degree that I smuggle in Jesus, which by the way isn't accidental in some sense, and I'm fully conscious when I'm doing it, you smuggle in love, and it essentially plays the same role.
Well, no, love is an experienced reality. I mean, love is a state of consciousness. It's a state of, and I wouldn't ultimately.
Is it a fact?
Well, it's a fact that one can experience it or not.
Well,
to varying degrees.
But that's not the same thing.
No, it is. I mean, there are
it's a
facts.
fact that you can experience something, but the thing that you're experiencing is, there's also the thing that you're experiencing as a fact.
Well, no, there are facts about the range of human experiences. I mean, I think, and not even just human, just conscious experiences.
Right. So Harris here will just go and talk about how well the Buddhists can now categorize all the different loves. They've got 12 different categories for love, and so he's basically saying subjectivity is just an extension of the objective world. You can just say this is a fact, and Peterson is saying no, you can experience love, but love is not the thing that you're experiencing. It might be a woman, that's an object. And somebody else is not the same experience, Another woman doesn't love the woman that So it's not universal, So your subjective state is not universal. In fact, like I'll show you, Donald Trump's a perfect example. People love him or hate him or are apathetic about him, and they don't know why everyone's talking about him. But the point is, Donald Trump is the same thing, and yet everybody seems to be experiencing polar opposite subjective. This is what we mean by the term polarization. They're experiencing polar opposite reactions to him, but he himself is not changing for each of the. He's the same object. He's a subject, but he's also an object. What the hell was that? Anyway, keep going. Let's just see. Harris
we can build computers that can feel love. I mean, that's not inconceivable, and we'll either succeed in doing that or not. But consciousness admits of a range of experiences, and love is one of the best on offer. It's not the only one we care about, but it's the one that anchors us to a positive commitment to the well-being of other conscious systems. And
but it's not
the crucial thing is
the fact. I agree with you, Sam.
No, it is a fact that loving someone entails a really, I mean, there are love and its counterfeits, right? People can confuse, romantic, attachment or lust with love, right? So I mean, and the Buddhists are especially good at differentiating these various states of consciousness, and it's this true pleasure, mental pleasure in the company of another that is colored by a commitment to their well-being, a wanting them to be happy, a wanting to have their hopes realized, a non-zero sum commitment or sense of your entanglement with them. And you can see your failures to love. I mean, you can be with people who you think you love. I'm with my best friend, say, and I just find out something fantastic has happened for him, and let's say in his career, and I feel a moment of envy, say. Well, then you see, well, okay, just how much do you love this person if your first reaction to something good happened?
Well, you see, that's the thing with Harris, is Peterson makes a point, and then Harris just goes off at a tangent, and he's eloquent and articulate, but everyone who's on Peterson's side is just looking at it going, mate, that's not what we're talking about. So at the end of the day, Harris believes that, the subjective world is just an extension of the objective world. Peterson's saying the subjective world is as substantial as the objective world. Some people love Trump, others hate him, most are apathetic. He doesn't change. It's the difference in the people that are observing him or reacting to him. So the way you feel about a particular object depends upon the relationships you've given to all the other objects. To some people, Donald Trump is a rich man who's greedy and motivated by greed and blah, blah, blah. Whereas to somebody like me, I think he feels an obligation for the privilege of being born in America and succeeding in America, and he wants to provide the same opportunity to everyone as far and wide as he can. So it's just different relationships that I've given to all the other objects, and that's what makes me feel the way I do about Trump. And then other people have given all the other objects a completely different set of relationships. Right, so it's as subjective, it's as substantial as the objective world. Right, back to the slides. Now the void. I won't, because they talk about the void quite often in a lot of places in that half an hour. So when I talk about the third axiomatic difference, whether wisdom manifests or not, they'll talk about the void, and they also talk, they obviously talk about the bloody what manifests. They talk about the void, and they do talk about subjectivity in there. So it's all three of these big differences being discussed at the same time. But Sam Harris views the problem as being religion, or dogmatic, let's just say dogmatic religion. And then he says, well, the solution is secularism. Okay, and then what's going to happen is, and Douglas Murray says this leap into pure rationality, and Sam Harris says there is no leap, it's incremental. So in Sam Harris's mind, maybe in 300 years there will be no religious people or religion. The world will be secular. Brown people will be secular. White people, black people, everyone will be secular. There won't be the problems that we have today. Right? So he reckons the solution is secularism, and that's going to cancel out the problem of religion. Whereas what Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein and Douglas Murray are saying is the problem isn't religion, it's the void. And the void might be inside your psyche, but it's out there as well. There's a lot we don't know about the world. It's the unconscious, it's the unknown, it's chaos. Jordan Peterson talks about chaos a lot. And the solution to chaos is order. So he sees Christianity as a solution, an ordering of chaos, right? An ordering to solve that chaos. So he says Christianity is a solution. Islam is a solution. Secularism is a solution. And they're all different solutions. And of course, in Christianity, you've got Orthodox, and you've got Catholic, and then you've got the Reformation and all the variations that produced. So to Jordan Peterson, the void isn't, the problem is the void, and the void isn't going anywhere. There's always going to be something that we don't know. There are always going to be people born. You have to learn, spend 30 years learning what we've learned in our 30 years, for example. So the problem of the void's not going away, and nor are these solutions. Like, you can't expect somebody who can manage to order their lives and keep back the chaos and then say, no, you got to get rid of that one because this one is better. Solution C is better than solution A. You can't just force that onto people without causing a lot of death and destruction. And so we'll watch a video where they discuss how wisdom manifests, and they'll talk about the void there. But what I mean by wisdom manifests is Peterson will say that some solutions are better than other solutions, and there's knowledge and truth in those solutions that you've got to find, and you can't just dismiss the whole solution because you don't like some of it. Maybe you're going to have to come to like it. Maybe you like certain bits about it at different stages of your life. But he'll say, a solution is Judaism, but Christianity came and basically took Judaism and tacked on Christ and the New Testament. But if you look at, I think almost 2 billion people are Christian today. Judaism has far fewer numbers. You look at the countries that are Christian countries, they're more prosperous, Further, you could say, well, North America is Protestant. It's like the Protestant New World. South America is like the Catholic New World. North America is way more prosperous. So, there's commonalities between all of these solutions, and there's differences. Islam is probably, I'm not a fan of Islam at all. There's a lot not to like about it, but it's probably a better solution than even secularism. And you'll see Douglas Murray brings this up. He's saying in Europe, tens of millions of refugees have arrived from the Islamic world, and the European population is fighting over whether they should be more Christian or more secular. There's one section demanding secularism, and they'll go into this, and their core value is tolerance, and they'll put tolerance over truth. So that's why they want hate speech laws. Even though you're telling the truth, you're not being kind about it. So boom, jail time. And then there's other parts saying where secularism's failing, Christianity picks up the slack, and we need to somehow find a way to strengthen this. We've got to go into the underground and rescue the father, or you've got to rescue the culture. And then at another point, Jordan Peterson says to Sam Harris, after he says something about we could easily solve a lot of problems, blah, 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 Jordan Peterson says, well, then do it. To which Sam Harris says, well, that's not what I'm trying to do. he wrote a book called The Moral Landscape, and Peterson is going, he does a big facial. He's saying, well, that's exactly what you're doing. That's what my book's doing. But my book, I know, is not going to become the new Bible, right? I'm trying to support solution A with my little attempt at a solution to try and highlight A. Whereas, he's saying to Harris, if you've got all the answers, then do it. Make it manifest. I want you to do it. Have a go. Have a try. Right, so we'll watch that video and then finish it up. Right, here we go.
Longest time, I mean, it's still in the United States, you cannot run for the presidency without pretending to believe in God. It's amazing. It's an amazing fact, right? When will that change? Someday it will, but we have just had almost no time, to experiment in this space and innovate in this space.
Well, there's been some time. There have been some decades. And I suppose the thing that unites Jordan and me on this is if we face some of the problems, some of the enemies, you might even say, that you identify as well, and the question is whether you should face them in the midst of an experiment that may or may not work, i.e. a leap into pure rationality, or whether you might decide it's worth, among other things, taking some of the versions of things that you've had that have been of worth in your past and using them where they're useful.
But what are you picturing there? Because there really is no leap. There's no global leap to pure rationality.
Yeah, you see, so this is the difference between them. Murray is talking about problems and solutions. And to Murray's, what Murray might categorize as attempted solutions, Harris just puts into the category of problems. And then the other thing is, Harris thinks the void can be negated. If we fix things up with secularism, the void will vanish. There won't be a void. It'll be sorted out. Whereas Douglas knows that something will fill that void.
There's this incremental erosion of religious answers to terrestrial questions. So there's again, the moment you have a science of neurology, you begin to look at epilepsy not as demonic possession, but as a neurological problem. Before there's a science of neurology, you don't know what the hell's happening, right? So into that space.
Something obviously drove Douglas, I would say, in some sense, surprisingly, to make the assumption that one of the things that we need to do to defend whatever it is that we have of value in the West, assuming that we have anything of value, was something like the reincorporation of this religious substructure. So it's not something that I would have expected you to conclude.
Yeah, but what
so
are you
why
picturing?
did you conclude it?
Well, partly for the reason I just suggested, that the leap into pure rationality, there's no evidence yet that it's going to work, or it's going to be enough, or enough people are going to be able to partake in it.
But give me the precise place where you're worried that it's going to fail, and what are you imagining
Well, you
doing?
think it's failing now.
Yeah, let me give you one example.
Yeah.
And we may be in the midst of the discovery that the only thing worse than religion is its absence.
And where are we discovering that?
Look at the religions that people are making up as we speak. I mean, every day there's a new dogma, and you and I and Jordan have repeatedly tripped over those dogmas. Some usually survived, it has to be said, but...
Right, so Harris hates dogma. Even though you have no proof or rational reason to believe something, you believe it anyway. So he hates religious dogma, but there's dogmas rocking up every day. Look at climate science, people just dead on believe it, and then that has, they want to change the way the economy's run, which is going to make people poorer. And then when that turns into political problems, they're going, oh, look at all these intolerant people. Oh, you want to change the economy, but we're the intolerant ones. So, and then people, they just believe it, and you go, oh, tell me about it, convince me. And they go, oh, I don't know, I'm just trusting the scientists. That's exactly what people used to do. They'd say, I'm just trusting the priests and the church. So it's dogmatic. And then if you know a bit about science and you say, look, these people are trying to construct models out of reductionist science. You can't do that and have any accuracy at all. And then they just go, oh, well, so you think you know better than all the scientists. And then you go, well, it's not all the scientists. That's more fake news. If you actually talk to scientists, you'll find out that it's, the breaks down similar to the rest of the population. It's got more to do with predisposition than scientists just being able to work out what's going on with the climate. They have no clue. So, and that's not the end of it. There's feminism, and there's people doing yoga, and they want you to be more like them and more sort of Buddhist, where they go and meditate and stop their thoughts, because thinking causes our problems. It's like some of us think thinking sorts out our problems, so we don't want to stop thinking. And then it just goes to small things, veganism, and anyone who, like, in Australia, all the city vegans who hate their jobs and their lives are meaningless and they're miserable, they become vegans because that gives them purpose and they're going to save all the animals. And then they want to cancel the live sheep export ban, and they want to ban this and ban that. So they start attacking the rural communities, working to feed people, and they're just going, well, you're evil because you. So you go, okay, so what's going to happen if we cancel the live sheep export? Because it costs money to feed sheep. That you can't just take that food from another farmer who's grown the hay. You've got to buy it and then feed your sheep. They need feeding. There's not enough. So if you suddenly if you just close that industry down overnight, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of animals are going to starve, pretty much, or get a bullet in the back of the head. When the farmer shuts down his operation, goes, there's no money in this, so I just got to get out as cheaply as possible and shut down the show. So, like Murray says, there are dogmas showing up all the time. So sure, there's religious dogma, but maybe that's better than all these other dogmas, because maybe in a integrated superstructure, like Peterson calls it, you can work your way out of that dogma and then have reasons to believe the things that you believe, and dogma. We live in like a Protestant world now, so there really is no force. You're not forced to believe dogma. There's dogma, and you choose to believe it or not. People should have that right to choose. It's not like we're living in the days of the Spanish Inquisition, where you, at the threat of death, have to believe the dogmas. There's dogma, but it's voluntarily entered into. And that's what Murray is saying, is there's going to be dogma and all the people that commit the heresies. It's like caged eggs. I bought caged eggs and someone was like, no, you've got to buy free-range eggs. And I'm just going, no, I'm buying fucking caged eggs. Don't treat me like a damn heretic. Don't treat me like Galileo because I bought the wrong fucking eggs. But, Harris just doesn't seem to recognize that problem. Or even further, the problem is, instead of all the dogma being consistent across people, so you just know, okay, I'm going to come across a Catholic now. Know how to deal with that. One day you're eating caged eggs and getting shat on by the one person. Next day you've made a joke and the feminists are having a go at you. And then the next day you aren't supporting the university kicking out the new climate scientist because he was too right-wing. And then it's political, then it's economic. And so you're just tripping over dogmas everywhere you go. There's just 1,000 tribes now instead of 4 religions. And countries being homogenous, and Islam being over there and Christianity being over here. Now we're all the tribes are like inside of an atomized culture. So you just, wherever you go, you're just being a heretic, basically. It's madness.
They're stampeding to create new religion all the time at the moment. Every new heresy that's invented. And they're not as well thought through as past heresies. They don't always have the bloody repercussions yet, but you can easily foresee a situation in which they do.
Right,
I mean, a new religion is being created as we speak by a new generation of people who think they are non-ideological, who think they're very rational, who think they're past myth, who think they're past story, who think they're better than any of their ancestors and have never bothered to even study their ancestors.
Right. So, but can't you say that dogmatism is the problem? The generic problem here is dogmatism, a firm belief in the absence of good argument and good evidence.
See, so Harris just goes, I don't want you to be too specific, which I understand we need to generalize. That's how you get to, specifics over time. But he's now going, okay, you've gone through all the trouble of coming up with a very specific. Now just go back and say the problem is dogmatism, and then we'll cancel out that problem, and then there will be no void, and there will be no problem, and secularism will be just pure solution. Everything's great. It's like, that's not going. You can't just go and tell everyone what dogma is and give them the definition, and then dogmatism goes away. No, you've got to deal with dogmatism because it's not going anywhere.
And absolutely, we can agree that dogmatism of any kind has that danger, or will always have that danger. But the void also has a danger. The void that you can create if you throw out all the stories that helped get you to where you are also has this danger, because people come up with these new stories. And every day's news now is about this. Our politics is now basically about this. Actually...
Yeah, and what's flown in to fill the gap seems to be something like a new tribalism.
Absolutely.
Which is exactly what you'd expect in some sense, right? If you demolish the superordinate system, religion divides people, no doubt, but it also unites people.
Yes.
And so one of the things that arguably unites people above their mere tribalism is their union in an abstract religious superstructure. Yeah. And then if you demolish that, well, then one of the things that does seem to happen is the emergence of a reflexive tribalism, because people need a group identity of sorts. And the easiest thing to do seems to be to revert to ethnicity and race and gender and sex, etc., etc. And then we do end up, and have ended up, in this situation that Douglas outlines. And, one of the things I think that distinguishes us temperamentally, possibly, maybe because you're a little more on the liberal side and I'm a little more on the conservative side, even temperamentally speaking, is that your fundamental terror is that of fundamentalism, although you also state in the moral landscape that you understand the perils of nihilism. And I would say my fundamental terror is that of nihilism, even though I'm sensitive to the catastrophes of fundamentalism. But I don't think you do address the problem of the void sufficiently, because I don't think that you have anything to offer except, and I'm not trying to minimize your offering. You make a case that people should work to alleviate suffering and that we should live in truth, but Jesus, Sam, you can summarize that in 2 sentences. It doesn't have the potency of the fictional, literary, artistic substructure that seems necessary to make that into something that's a compelling story.
Well, so this is where we might disagree. This could be a fundamental disagreement. Because I don't see the problem of nihilism the way you do, or the way it's advertised. Like, once you rip out the false certainties and the bad evidence and the bad arguments and the mere dogmas imposed on us by prior generations, that hole never closes safely with anything else. You have to put something in its place that's shaped just like that, some other false certainty or some other story. And I simply don't think that's the case. I think there's so many things we outgrow, both individually, in our own childhoods, and culturally, that where there is no void left. There's no Santa Claus-shaped void that we have to fill with the exact same thing.
But people certainly experience that.
Some people,
void.
I'm not discounting the fact that it is hard to be happy in this world. I mean, we are living in a world that seems perfectly designed to frustrate our efforts to find permanent happiness.
So you asked me, you put me on the spot a while back.
But let me just add my answer to this. I just think that there's the recipe for a good life, or at least a minimal recipe for a good life. It's not that this is all that's entailed, but this is certainly necessary, if not sufficient, is to live a life that is increasingly motivated by love and guided by reason. Right? You can't go very far wrong if you are motivated by love and guided by reason. Right? And the problem is that.
Well, okay. Well, the first thing I would say about that is, to me, that's a recapitulation of the Judeo-Christian ethic, which is that you should be guided by.
Yeah, it's like a low-resolution Christianity. That's what secularism is. Like low resolution, low territory. So it's fine. It's a stop off on the way, but you've got to at some point acknowledge that that's what it is. You know, and then later on, you know, in the talk, Jordan Peterson says, I don't think you can get away with that because is it love or is it rationality? You know, and then that's when Harris tries to sort of say, well, subjectivity is just an extension of objectivity, or the subjective world, you know.
Love and use logos to serve that.
Except you got to read the fine print on reason.
No, well, I didn't say reason. I said logos because that's that's something that's deeper than reason.
There's the Jesus smuggling.
Yes, exactly. Well, yes, definitely.
I said it would happen.
Okay, so, but so look, I've been trying to. Part of the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing is to try to address the void, let's say, and I suspect that many of you are actually here because you would like to have the void addressed. And so the way it looks to me is something like this, and this is what I've derived in part from my studies of religious tradition. So I could say that at the beginning of Genesis, for example, there's a proposition that it's truthful speech that generates habitable order from chaotic potential. That seems to me to be the fundamental narrative, and I do believe there's something dead accurate and real about that, because we do generate the world as a consequence of our communicative effort. And then there's a second proposition, which is that the world that we generate from the chaos of potential is habitable to the degree that the communication that we engage in is truthful. And that's why God, who uses the logos at the beginning of time to generate the world, is able to say that his creation is good. The proposition is the world you bring into being through truthful speech is good. And that's the image of God that's implanted in man and woman. And there's a grandeur about that idea. And you think, well, you don't need the grandeur because it's just a fiction. It's like, just wait a second here. It's not just a fiction, unless you don't believe that in some manner you partake in the creation of the world and that you have an ultimate responsibility that might well be described as divine to participate in that process properly, truthfully, and with love. And there's every reason to think that that's an elevated ideal so high that it's worthy of conceptualizing as divine, and also to presume that it represents some fundamental metaphysical reality. And that's a lot more powerful than you need to be good.
Yes, but the problem here, Jordan, is that I could do exactly what you just did with Buddhism or Hinduism.
Now you see, this is where Harris just doesn't see wisdom as having an easier time manifesting than foolishness. I mean, fine, Hinduism, there's, 1.6 billion Indians or something, I don't know, and a lot of them will be Hindu, but, it hasn't produced much prosperity, or, it hasn't done anywhere near the extent of what Christianity has done. And it's the same with Buddhism, because it's both Hinduism and Buddhism are fatalistic, which means they don't have the image of God idea that Christianity has, that Peterson was just talking about. That idea is that the more knowledge you get, the better life becomes. Subjectively, your experience of life improves the more you gain knowledge. And in the other side of the coin is life gets worse the more you just adopt false knowledge. That's how you end up depressed, is by believing things that aren't true, and then using those things to believe even more things that aren't true. So, Harris just goes, oh, well, it sounds grand. Hinduism sounds grand too. It's like, well, if we're 18 years old, maybe it sounds equally as grand. But some of us aren't 18 years old, and we can say, well, it doesn't sound as grand because here is a fundamental difference, and that affects things in a big way. So he doesn't bloody see this whole, some solutions are better and bigger and have more impact than his attempt. Now, Peterson wouldn't say, look, my solution in 12 Rules for Life is going to replace Christianity. He's saying, I'm trying to boost Christianity. You know, it might not even sell as many copies as your book, but it's not trying to solve the problem of the void, or that you've now mistaken for all these potential, attempted solutions. And then, Harris just goes on, and he just, just doesn't get the point, and doesn't seem to realize that we get what you're saying, mate, but it's pointless what you're saying.
And it is just as grand and just as deep and just as anchored to the first-person experience of contemplatives who've taken that as far as they could take it. People,
well, then
monastic.
I would say, Sam, you should do that and see how people respond to it.
Well, no, because I.
Yes,
because, no,
seriously.
No, because I see the end of the game. It doesn't arrive where I want to get to, where we need to get to, because it is.
See there, he's telling you what he believes. The end of the game is no more religion. So I don't want to defeat religion if it means that it's like a new religion. So he thinks religion will just fade away in 300 years. Maybe he's right, but I mean, why hasn't it done already? Maybe it is doing it. Why I just don't see the problem going away like that.
It would be to different effect. There are different claims ultimately about the status of truth and good and evil, and about the beginning of the world and the fate of a human consciousness after death. They're completely irreconcilable worldviews.
I also don't think
cannot
that
square. If there are Hindus in the audience, they believe something that is totally irreconcilable to what Christians believe.
I don't think that you can offer, pardon me, a watered-down version of Buddhism as a consequence of psychedelic experience, as a acceptable and credible alternative to the power of the fundamental founding myths of the Western culture.
Yeah,
and if you think you can, then you should try.
I'm trying. Well, I'm not trying that, but that's not what I. Well, first of all, just to get my biography straight, it's not just the psychedelic experience.
I know.
Yes.
And I'm also not making light of the psychedelic experience.
Listen, to take this, we're having most of this conversation on the side of wherein it seems reasonable to worry about the fate of civilization, right? We could have started at a very different point with just the nature of consciousness, right? Our first-person encounter with being itself. Right, all of us wake up each morning. We are thrust from a condition of.
Right, so he goes back to talking about his views on subjectivity. Right, where are these slides? So then, fast forward 15 minutes at the end. Jordan Peterson makes this point, which is, should we rescue our father, which is culture, or not? And he puts it in very mythological terms, trying to show that that's an idea that's been around forever, and if it's lasted, there must be some veracity to it. I think that's where I paused this video at. I've got to switch over. Right.
There's an ancient idea, a very ancient idea, that when you face the void, what you do is...
Perhaps I should let these guys talk more here. No, sorry. So at the beginning of the video, remember, this is the same video. This is where Harris gives up the point that Peterson's been making without even realizing it. He says we should use the best tools that we have at hand at the time. And that's the point Peterson's making. And so he's trying to now... He hasn't realized that he's given up the point to Peterson. So now Peterson's trying to hammer it home and say, we have a choice to make here. Right?
Confront it and leap into it. And what you discover at the bottom is a beast, and inside that beast you discover your father lying dead, and then you reanimate your father and you bring him back to the surface, and that's the means of dealing with the void. Right? And so In essence, in some sense, that's just what you said. You said that
except that again, there's something confabulatory about that, because you can do I could change the valence of virtually every word you use there, and it would also sound profound and true. I could swap father for mother, and I could swap void for mountaintop, and it could be the same seemingly archetypal journey. And someone could make sense of it.
It's not that easy, Sam. Like, that's the same thing.
It's damn easy. I've done it with a cookbook.
But look, if it's that easy, then you can write great novels.
No,
and you can tell great stories. Well, if it's that easy, it's not that easy to write a great story. So these things can't be swapped out with ease. And there is a reason that it's your father that you rescue from the belly of the beast and not your mother in those sorts of situations.
But
it is akin to...
Again, I give you Buddhism and Hinduism that have completely different iconographies and mythologies, and
well, they're different at some levels, but not at all. It's like languages. They're different at some levels and not at all.
They're crucially opposite in...
It's like Christianity and Islam. Both are monotheistic. They're not polytheistic. They have that in common at that level. But then that only Christianity has the Imago Dei, the image of God, imprinted in man and woman.
In many of these cases. I'm just saying that this kind of reading meaning into story there's a reason why it's not science. Because it is, in some basic sense, unfalsifiable. There's nothing you and I can do for the rest of our lives to be sure that the mother isn't at the bottom of that void and it's really the father.
Is it possible to develop a factual approach to the analysis of literature?
Well, yes, on its own terms. You can say, well, but that extends to things like it is a fact that Hamlet was the Prince of Denmark and not the king.
No, I meant in terms of the meaning of literature.
Well, yeah, but you can make true and false claims, or more and less plausible claims about literature.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, is to make more plausible
effects on
claims.
You. But again, this is a very different game than what most religious people think is on offer.
Well, look, if you look at the domain of science, most scientists aren't very good at what they do. And if you look at the domain of religious thinking, most religious thinking people aren't very good at what they do, but that doesn't mean that the whole damn thing should be thrown out. There's gradations of religious revelation and wisdom.
But there's that word, because revelation, if revelation is something that we can all do,
that's the point. You can't expect everyone to have 1 in 1,000 knowledge. Right? It's only 1 in 1,000 that'll have that. So all Harris is pointing out is that there's a hierarchy, that goes like this. And it's like, yeah, most scientists are shit. Most religious thinking people are shit at it. We all know there's a hierarchy and there's only one at the top. That's life.
You, me, and Marcus Aurelius, right? That is a very different world than the world that Muslims think they're living in.
But you just said, Sam, that we have to go in. This is why I used the going down into the void to rescue your father metaphor. You just said that we have to, and you've said this before, and I know you believe it as well, that we have to go back into the past and find the wisdom that can help guide us, because we don't have to do this as if we're encountering everything for the first time. And that's exactly the idea of going into the void to rescue your father. That's how that is the eternal, age-old medication for the confrontation of the void. And you said it yourself. And so I don't know which it is. It's like, do we have to go into the past to rescue what's best, given the understanding that there is something there worth rescuing, or not? Is it pure rationality and nothing else moving forward?
See, so I think Harris is worried that if you are like Peterson and you're going into the past and you're grabbing bits of value to use now, in your times, in your life, that you're going to be a dogmatic Christian about it. You're going to come and bring it all back, every word of the Bible as sacrosanct as every other word. And that's, Peterson is saying, are we going to go into the past, whether it's Christian or Enlightenment, and grab things of value, and you're going to allow people to do that? Because people are going to naturally go into Christianity and come back with things of value because it's manifested. So you got to expect that to happen. And Harris is sort of saying, it's just blanketing religion and saying none of it. But then the funny thing is, what fills his personal void is like Peterson says, it's like a watered down Buddhism, which is a religion, which you're against. But on your own, you've come up with a watered down Buddhism. So you're creating your own religion because you have to. It's not like it can be dealt with in any other way.
Unconstrained by convention.
It's just,
there we go.
Again, I want our certainties, and I think we all, in every other area of our lives, we agree about this effortlessly, right? If I'm pretending to be certain of something that you can sense I have no good reason to be certain about, you begin to mistrust me in every area, if it's in business, or if it's in...
Okay, so back to the slides. Right, so I just want to finish off with a few comments. And I think, in the past, people understood life a lot top down. Religion, dogmatic religion, you could even say. And I've been watching The Last Kingdom on Netflix. And that's, I think it's set in like 1000 AC, so like 1000 years ago, when the Danes had basically taken over all of England except for Wessex, and that's the last kingdom. And it's Christians versus pagans, and pagans are just people that believe in multiple gods. And you could analyze that idea and say people who don't think they need to understand economics because it's got nothing to do with their job and earning money, they're also pagans. They don't seem to realize that knowledge is all integrated. There isn't separate fields. There's not separate domains of knowledge. It's all integrated in one domain of knowledge. So in those days, people didn't know about germs. They didn't know about the laws of physics. They really were inundated with chaos. And at that time, top-down religion worked well. And that's, after the Roman conquest of Britannia, the English, or the people that were living there at the time, the Anglo-Saxons, took up Catholicism. And you see it all the time. The king's baby is sick, and there's this pagan ally, and he says, look, this woman can do some pagan ritual and your kid will get better. And the kid gets better. Nowadays you might just say maybe the fever burnt off, or like we have more understanding. But then there it's like, oh well, I've gone against God's wishes. What commandment it is, the second commandment: don't idolize, don't worship false idols. So now the king's all torn up, because I've broken a commandment, but my kid has got better. So what does that say about us and our religion? That's trying to understand the world from the top down. If you understand God, then you can understand the specific events. Right, and then more recently, the last few hundred years, 300, 400 years, we've started understanding the world bottom up, and we're saying if we can understand the specific events, then we can then project up and understand the top. So we're going to build it with just pure certainty. That's René Descartes' I think, therefore I am. The only thing he was certain about is that he was conscious, and he tried to then build his worldview based on that certainty, only adding certainties and just ignoring anything that was uncertain. So that's Sam Harris's position. You see, he always talks about he doesn't want any false certainties, and he will call them false even though maybe they're just unverified or unverifiable. He only wants things that he's certain about. Anything that has any whiff of uncertainty, he's got to reject out of his worldview. And he's really worried about this top-down religion, dogma. Now, I don't think we live in a world where top-down dogmatic religion is going to appeal to us, because we know so much about life. We all go to school and we learn a bit of chemistry and physics and biology. So top-down is never going to appeal to us. And I don't think Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray and the Brett Weinsteins of the world are trying to bring top-down religion back. What they're doing is something more like middle out. And it's true, like we don't, the first things we know aren't that there are atoms. And, when you're a kid, like I remember being, I don't know how old I was, and somebody said, one of my friends that I was playing with, it got really windy, and he said, where does the wind come from? And it was like, fuck, I haven't even thought about that, but yeah, where does it come from? And then you run off and you ask your parents, and they go, oh, well, the wind is just cool air moving to where the hot air is and trying to equalize. And you're going, oh, because you understand cool and hot. Then you go to school and you learn that there's molecules and pressure, and these molecules expand or get closer together with the pressure, and then you understand wind. But you have to work your way down to understanding that there's those molecules. Now, at the same time, if you are acting in life and you keep stumbling and then figuring out what made me stumble there, and you go and you notice there's a pattern, it's always something that I didn't know about. It was the unknown. Well, then suddenly you realize, okay, I need a category for this unknown thing. And we'll call it the unconscious, but that's very secular. It doesn't give you much to go on. So you try and now build more high resolution category for the unknown. And you look at life and you say, every time I learn something new, did I wish it wasn't true, or am I happy that it is true? Say like a business fails and you learn a fact about economics, that there's production side scarcity. If you think about it, you go, what do I wish that I actually worked and that I was successful, or am I glad that I failed and learned this new knowledge? And that's made life richer and more, and you sort of go, no, I'm glad I learned the knowledge, even though it would be nice to have a successful business that was bringing in money and making certain section of, livelihood easier. And you notice that more knowledge is better for your psyche, your subjective being. And then that's the image of God, right? It's like the unknown is good. It's good to know it, to come to know it, to go through the process and act and try and do things even though a lot of them are going to fail, just so that you can get that knowledge. And so I think we're entering a phase where I think there's going to be top-down religious people. There's going to be bottom-up scientist sort of people. And I think most people are going to turn to this middle-out approach like Jordan Peterson's, where he's very psychological about all of it, and he creates these, talks about order and chaos, and then he can criticize different religions and say, well, this is going to have this effect on your psyche, and this is going to affect you like this, and blah. So, yeah, those are just my final thoughts. We've got those 3 axiomatic differences, and if you watch from 116 to 148 a couple of times, like that's basically all they're talking about, and they're just circling around those differences, because it's 6 different. Peterson talks about subjectivity, Harris talks about subjectivity. It makes him talk about the void. The void makes him talk about whether wisdom manifests more easily or not. So yeah, I would watch that if you found this interesting. Hopefully this explains the void, because this is all such hard stuff to talk about, because I've got my categories in my head, and I know that if I use a word, you probably have a different category in your head for it. But this is what's going on in the culture right now, is whether we rescue our father or not, middle out, whether we rescue our culture from the middle out or not, which is to say we just proceed bottom up, with all the problems that's caused in the last couple of 100 years, and that those problems are nihilism is big in the West, and totalitarianism, which was big in the 20th century. You had Mao, you had Russia, you had the Nazis. So that really is the question: is should we rescue our culture from the middle out or not? I should probably add that in, yeah. From the middle or not. sorry. Capitalize, don't capitalize. Righto, so, you know, I hope people that have been paying attention to Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris through these debates, or just even know of one of them and has a preference, because there are a lot of people are divided on these guys. Like, I'm not much of a fan of Harris, but on the other side, you notice Harris has got a lot of fans. This is where our Western societies are divided at like the deepest level. So if you can get to understand these differences, you can then work your way up and understand politics and economics and understand what's going on around the dinner table at your place and at the parties you go to and so on. You know, basically, this is the deepest question that's been fought about in the West. And like in the Last Kingdom, it was a fight between Catholics and pagans, and you go 500 years after that, and it was a battle between Catholics and Protestant Reformation churches. And so this battle has always been there. It's just, you know, it's just always the battle lines are being redrawn pretty much, and everyone's picking sides. And I honestly think Jordan Peterson and those guys are going to come out winners, you know. So I'm just hoping that, you know, if you're a Sam Harris fan and you just can't understand why so many people like Peterson, and you watch that half an hour 3 times, it's a bit like good music, you know, like you might have to listen to the album 3 times and suddenly the whole album makes sense. It's the same thing. If you watch that video, a 30-minute section of that debate, and you keep an eye on the void, wisdom manifesting, and subjectivity, and you just watch it a few times, you'll come to understand Jordan Peterson. And likewise, it's useful knowing what the other guys are thinking, you know, so that you can, instead of arguing on you know, these really small bits out in the periphery, you can get right to the core of it and say, well, don't you think, you know, that would manifest if it was better than the solutions we've already used in the past, that have made so many people belong to that religion or that religion, or yeah. So I know this has probably been long-winded, but I've been watching that video, trying to like write down timestamps to try and like put a nice little argument together so that I could keep it short. And I recorded a couple of times, and it's just so difficult to record these things, you know, just to just present them well. I mean, yeah, so I've done my best. I know it's probably dragged on a bit, but hopefully you've got something out of this. And if you take that, what you get out of this, and watch that half an hour section, you'll then get a whole lot more. And the next thing, you might be watching a whole lot of Jordan Peterson and just mining it, rescuing your father from the belly of the beast. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay classy, stay good. See you later. Out.